Sound check, sound check. Yay.
Hello and welcome to episode 360 of the Crate and Crowbar. My name is Chris Thurston, and tonight, on the 5th of March 2021, I am joined by Marsh Davies.
Hello.
Alex Wiltshire.
Hello.
And Tom Francis.
Hello.
360 seems like an auspicious number, but for no good reason, really.
It is no scope.
If we were Microsoft, this would be our second podcast.
Yeah. Well, and we'll follow this up with Crate and Crowbar 1.
Also, if the podcast fails at any point, you can just wrap it in a towel.
True.
Always true, actually.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have to wait 360 episodes to know that. Just waiting for someone to finally find a towel.
Gently smother us.
Exactly. When will we escape? Almost coming up on a podcast for every day of the year. I was going to say, imagine what a miserable year that would be, but it's March 2021. So we've got some news. We've got some internet news from the internet, at least, about video games. Should we begin with some sad news if you are me circa late 2018, I guess?
This is specific.
Artifact. Artifact, Valve's foray into the card game CCG genre is coming to an end. They've done a blog that basically states that the kind of Artifact 2.0 beta has not garnered enough interest or sustained enough of a player base to justify continued development. So that version of the game is being renamed Artifact Foundry and released for free alongside Artifact 1, effectively. And all its cards and every single part of it will just be available on Steam for free to anyone who wants to play it. But otherwise, this journey ends here, which I think is kind of a shame, because I can't remember what I said about Artifact when it came out, but I know I went to bat for it a lot. A lot. And what effect did that have? None at all.
That's also... they've also made the old Artifact completely free as well, right? Everyone has all the cards, and you can't buy them in any way. Which is that part I was interested in because, I mean, I think this is the nicest way to wind something down. Like, you don't often see a company do this where they just cut off all way for them to make revenue from it and still keep it running and still play it. Everything's free. We give up. But I was wondering about I remember the original Artifact, buying cards. You know, the fact you had to pay for the game and then also buy cards was a big part of it. And does just having all the cards from the start, is that going to change the game? Is that going to make it feel, worse in some ways? Or
I think what has happened to my memory? I should remember this. It wasn't that long ago, but I was in the Artifact beta alpha from, I think, as one of the very earliest stages, and there was a point where all the cards were just available for testing purposes. And that was the best the game was, in my opinion. And I think I probably issued some kind of now deeply shameful apologia for its attempted kind of arch business model at the time. And I was wrong about that. I think the thing that killed that game was being a CCG where kind of market forces were also expected to be part of the game. It's a really good game. It didn't need to be hooked up to that particular experiment to do with the Steam marketplace that Valve has been kind of, or at that time at least, had been sort of taking various different kinds of stab at in terms of what players will buy and sell to each other for real money. I can understand that. It is effectively an attempt to recreate the conditions of the Magic the Gathering secondary market in a video game. And I was thinking about this recently in terms of people's very righteous shutdowns of crypto art, that the lack of scarcity is the advantage here. It's not a problem to solve, And so I think maybe that was always a kind of doomed libertarian expedition of some kind, which I appreciate makes them sound like Arctic explorers that don't share, but nonetheless.
Do you think that the Foundry version, as it's now called, did that fail on its merits, or was it just so cursed by the rep that it was never given a chance?
Do you know what? This is a shameful admission for someone who really went to bat for that game. I never played it.
Huh.
I kind of like really liked Artifact and also stopped playing it and got the email day one of Artifact 2.0 and read the first couple of blog posts and didn't really understand the changes and therefore didn't feel that pull to go and relearn a game that I liked, basically. So I can't comment.
Well, that probably answers it, really. Like, because I, as someone who wasn't super into Artifact, but sort of found it vaguely appealing, sort of like something like this could work for me. I also didn't play the revamped version, so if it didn't get either of us, then who did it get?
Yeah, and I think it was a very earnest attempt to find a new kind of destiny for that set of systems and those set of ideas. But I think the original Artifact was a fully realized idea for a card game. It was just a really complicated one. And I don't think that's necessarily going to be niche. I think the other side of it is like, I think maybe those games, and maybe this is a little bit of it has been traditionally a bit of a Valve issue generally. They're a little arch for what the audience actually wants out of them a lot of the time. Like, the success of a lot, because Artifact in many ways also had its lunch eaten by the kind of then emerging auto chess genre. Including Dota Underworlds, which was kind of like, as far as I understand it, a much quicker turnaround compared to Artifact, despite kind of occupying the same kind of space. And auto chess, obviously, there can be enormous depth to auto chess, but auto chess is far more transparently like a big strategic slot machine in the way that CCGs can also be. And I think they attempted to create something wholly skill-based and deeply complicated and that only, with a kind of, level of complexity that would make it appeal to people who had felt like they had mastered other more complicated games in that genre, or at least other complicated games in that genre. And what people really wanted was something with that kind of like, maybe I'll win, maybe I won't. I'm just going to kind of spin the wheel a few times and see what happens, which is a big part of the appeal of like, card games and similarly kind of random games. And so, yeah, this doesn't surprise me. And I think, as you say, Tom, I think the way they've kind of dismounted from this is about as classy as it can. And I kind of hope people see its value when they can come along and just play with every card and build a deck. And
that old Paul it used to have of, I think the identity that it took on was, it's that game where you have to buy all the cards and it's a real rip-off and it's really annoying. I think that knowing that that's all free, there's a good chance that it might actually find a brand new audience. Like, I don't know. I felt, weirdly enough, on reading Valve's post about it, I kind of felt quite positive. I thought, that sounds like it has a good, not even an afterlife. Like this is the next, just a new chapter for it.
Yeah, I think you could be right. I mean, I think, and maybe that's the other thing is, I think Valve, it's interesting. I think Valve at the time considered the financial side of it, the buy-in, the value of cards to be part of the game. That's kind of what I was gesturing at with the kind of leaning into the market thing. And I think they have, like many companies, consistently failed to consider the emotive impact of cost on humans. Like that's the kind of game you can design if like disposable income is just a part of your life, Like, wouldn't it be fun to stake some money in this way? A person says, being paid pretty well to work in a tech company on the West Coast. And I think it's that thing of like really not anticipating how that goes down with audiences elsewhere. And a lot of other companies in the similar kind of space mask the actual cost, do a much more robust job of pretending it's not as expensive as it is to kind of really get into one of these games.
I also thought that I read some interviews with Richard Garfield after he left Valve about this, and I found him to be very unhumble about it. And he had exactly an attitude I very much advise game designers against when I see it in like newer game designers. Obviously, he's extremely experienced, but that defensiveness of like when your idea doesn't work out and people don't play it right, you blame the players and not yourself. Like he had a lot of things of like, I can actually prove that this is, balanced and it's not, people are saying it's like this, but I can prove they're wrong with the numbers. And it's like, no, I think if people don't like it, you can't prove that they do.
Right. you can't play a game wrong, really. You know, well,
there's always it's always something to do with the game.
On that note, actually, I don't want to segue off Artifact too quickly if people have other points to make about it. But there has been, I think, one of my favorite instances of stop it, you're playing the game wrong I've ever seen recently. if I could tell a brief story, which concerns Destiny 2. But I promise you, I'm not going to go off on one.
You know how Marty gets.
I can sense it. I can sense it only a couple of miles away.
My arms are folded,
pouting,
already sinking back into my chair with a frown.
Right. Well, so I was having a chat with a friend a little while ago about like, what's the point of Destiny 2? Is it to engage with the gunplay and like Bungie's 30 seconds of fun over and over and test your skill and, you know, master all these different combat encounters and enemy types? Or is it to furnish a paper doll character model with more and more better and better stuff, effectively? And the answer is obviously the latter. And like, I think as soon as you have like a treadmill in your game, the game is going to be about the treadmill, regardless of, you know, whatever kind of relative sort of arch statement you try to make about the purpose of, you know, that's just there to reward you for your engagement with the other mechanics. I think players will seek the quickest and simplest way to avoid playing the game in order to just get the things, the kind of ephemeral rewards, whatever they are. And last week, one of the things that's most pointed about this in Destiny, and I think it's really is a mode called Trials of Osiris, which is its kind of high-end PvP mode, and it's supposed to run like a weekend tournament. The goal here, from a design point of view, is that players buy in with in-game, you know, resources, with a ticket that lasts a weekend, and you play games against other people who've bought in with their teams of 3 with a ticket. And you rack up wins and losses. If you get 3 losses, you have to reset your ticket, which doesn't cost you any more, but you have to kind of go back to the beginning. And the more wins you get, the better rewards you get when the ticket ends. And the best possible thing you can do is get 7 wins and 0 losses, which will whisk you away to a special location for mega prizes. And the goal is it's supposed to be this very tense, almost kind of like, you know, tournament format weekend thing. And since the outset of Destiny 2, it has been variously present or removed from the game because players won't stop breaking it, because they will do absolutely anything to avoid engaging with it in the spirit that it's intended, like anything. And most of the time, this manifests as like a fairly obviously malign things, like cheating on PC particularly. Like a lot of the market for paid cheats for Destiny comes from this, and then also that's kind of has a symbiotic relationship with the marketplace for paid carries, like actually paying a cool teenager to carry you through a couple of trials matches to get you the good guns. So there's a secondary market that springs up, and all of that stuff you can, as a like a game developer, you can look at and kind of comfortably be like, well, that's a EULA issue, or that's a community, that's a security issue, or a moderation issue, or or one of these things that can be kind of brought in. This is obviously a violation of how the game is intended to be played. But it's been an ordeal for years. Last week, the mode just gets abruptly taken offline for initially no one really understands why. And then it comes out that about a patch ago, Bungie added a really sensible feature, which is if you get disconnected from a Trials game, you can reconnect. That makes sense. And also, for the sake of allowing people sort of flexibility as a quality of life thing, you can switch characters. What then happened is the Chinese Destiny community discovered a way to basically implement a kind of crowdsourced, infallible and leaderless match fixing system using those 2 mechanics. So what happens is people load in their teams of 3, and 2 of them wear a particular emblem which kind of displays to the other team at the start to indicate their willingness to participate in this scheme. And this emblem was chosen, it wasn't intended this way, because a symbol that's on it looks a bit like the kind of Chinese shorthand for lol, like, laughing out loud. When this happens, this is like a really efficient bit of quick communication. You see a team that has 2 of these logos, that means they're participating in the scheme. The third person, who doesn't have the logo on but is in the team, is the leader. The 2 leaders add each other on Steam and use Steam's system of random number generation little toys in the chat thing to roll a dice, and the winner of the dice roll will be chosen as the winner of the game of Trials of Osiris. So, and then what they'll do, the team that is designated the losers will stay on those characters. They will wait patiently while the team now designated the winners will switch to a different character, which is the one they're planning to win on. When they're back and everyone's loaded in and everyone's happy, everyone else, the losing team will just jump off cliffs until the game is over or quit. And then they will just requeue. And after having banked their win on their winning character, the other team will switch back to their kind of, initial characters, and they'll requeue. And if you encounter a team that isn't wearing the emblems and therefore isn't participating in the scheme, you simply quit. Because you were planning to lose on this character anyway, so it doesn't matter. And if you encounter the team that is wearing the emblems, you already know that you both understand it. So you just add on Steam, there's no language barrier because it's simple as Steam friend request and then a dice roll. And there is basically no way that over a sufficient period of time, it doesn't result in everyone who wants to getting the best possible result out of the tournament. And so it's really elegant, as a bit of I don't know, it's not really game design, but it's like how to solve a puzzle, right? The puzzle is you have all these players entering a random system that is going to match them randomly. Because people have tried match fixing before, but it's always been to do with VPNing to a region where the game is currently, where most of the player base is asleep, to maximize your chance of matching with a friend you've already agreed to throw the game to or something like that, which is very chancy and prone to error. Whereas this, it literally can't fail. There's basically no way to get around it. And the amazing thing is, Bungie can't fix it without removing quality of life features that have a very good reason to be there. There's probably other changes they could make. And the other great thing about it is, it pretty much takes the bottom out of the cheats and paid carries market. Because why cheat? Why cheat where you could just wear a special hat that indicates I'm willing to enter a match fixing scheme? They can't ban your, if you cheat, you could get caught and your account could be suspended. No one's going to suspend you for just happening to wear a particular hat that indicates you're willing to add someone on Steam and happen to roll a dice. I love it. I think it's great. And I think they should leave it there because honestly, I think if they were honest, they would know that what are they protecting? They could only be protecting the sanctity of those rewards. And they were fucked the moment cheating became rampant. So, yeah, I don't know. I really like it. I think it's one of the funniest, little kind of community efforts to completely circumvent a developer's intent I have ever seen.
It really reminds me of that. You've seen that comic with, the dog bringing the stick back and saying, throw? And the owner tries to take the stick. It's no take, only throw. It's rewards? No fun, only rewards.
Exactly. I think about that. Honestly, that comic, I think about it all the fucking time. It's weird. That Mean Girls trying to make fetch happen are 2 of the most useful touch points for explaining why a game design idea isn't going to work. You're either trying to make it happen too hard, or the audience just wants what it wants. Have you ever seen the cat variant of that comic?
No.
Which is a cat and someone's hand is approaching it and the cat scowls and hisses and goes, "No pet, only pet." That's the other one. And I think that's the, profound design wisdom to be found there, I think.
Does the match fixing degrade the quality of the experience for people who want to play the game legitimately? Because you said people quit out if they don't want to have an honest game. Is that a real problem?
So it started to spread because people figured out this was happening, and so European players were VPNing to Hong Kong because even if they weren't going to try and participate in the scheme, they would encounter enough people who would quit immediately and therefore give them easy wins. So I guess, yes, it does affect the experience of people who log in and go, I would like a balanced game of competitive Destiny 2 against worthy opponents. I would like to become excited and stressed by the stakes of high stakes sci-fi wizard combat. I think there's maybe 3 of those people. Everyone else is I would like the gun with the cool Eye of Osiris on it and the new armor that makes me look like a beetle. Like, that's everyone else. You know? Because that's the thing I want to play. I want to play the game, but also in that moment, do I? You know?
This is a total tangent, but since you mentioned auto chess earlier, it reminded me there's a game coming out soon on PC called Lazy Chess, which it's already out on mobile, and I haven't played it myself, but the idea is fascinating, which is it's just a chess game where instead of you having free reign of what move to play, an AI figures out what the two best moves are you could play, then only offers you those two. So you just choose between what the AI considers to be the best move and the second best move, although it doesn't tell you which one is which. And that's kind of it sounds really good in theory. And then so I just heard from other people that for a lot of people it doesn't really work, because the reason a move is good in chess is not because of what it gains you this turn, right? It's not that it takes the most pieces or it does something. It's because it's going to lead into some other thing that you're going to do later down the line. And so that's kind of the challenge of this is you've been shown this is a good move. Now you've got to figure out why it's a good move. Like, why is the AI suggesting this? What is it leading to? But then also, because the strength of a move is based on what you will do in future based on your new position, you don't have any guarantee that the AI is going to offer you what you plan to do in response to this. Like, you think, oh, my rook is up here, that's going to really let me wreak havoc up behind the enemy ranks. But if the AI doesn't offer you that as one of its two options, then you can't do that later. And so you don't have that like trust that this move is even going to work, which I thought was a fascinating like game design problem.
That is strange. It sounds like the opposite of 5D chess multiverse time travel.
Yes.
Have you seen, which is
I haven't
like
played it.
I tried. I was just checking Steam. I apparently tried for 103 minutes, but that is like, have any of the others played this?
No.
Nope.
It is a chess game where, like, and I'm going to misremember this because it was about a year ago that I tried to get into it. It's a chess game, but every time a move you have several options to time travel. So you can play a piece in the same timeline that you're currently on, or you can go back in time and play the piece to like a previous game state, which creates a branching universe where the game is played out differently. And then every time it's your turn, it might be your turn across ultimately like 16 or 17 different parallel timelines, and your goal is to win in all of them or one of them. It's like the best and most playable thing about it for me was like it has a series of like chess puzzle type things to solve, which just about start to chip at like teaching you what this means. And I fully anticipate that there are people whose brains work in such a way that they can play this, but I found that it was like, oh, this is a fascinating game for AI to play against one another in some sort of like battle for dominance or something, but like maybe not something a human can do. And I actually really like this idea of like just two decisions chess. That sounds optimal. Don't solve that problem. Just let me pretend. Yeah. Let me pretend.
Well, in theory, like if you're looking at a move and you think it's good because it leads to this later cool situation, as long as the AI is also suggesting it for that reason, then you will be offered the opportunity to take advantage of it, right? Because that's if it thinks getting into that position is a good move, then it will also think taking advantage of it is a good move. But I know myself, and I know that I would always have some fucking harebrained idea of like, I'm going to do this weird thing, and then be slapped down by the AI saying, no, that doesn't make any sense.
You just need to chill out, go with the flow, you know?
I mean, actually, yeah, now this makes me think, now what I want is like, I play chess, but I just have like an Android co-pilot who just tells me what it thinks, and I can have an argument with it.
How about this? How about like a chess roguelike where rather than offering you two, where they're explicitly like the best and second best, every turn the game offers you like 5 things, which are like good, all the full span of options. There's a bad choice. And the goal is just to get to the end of the game, like a deck builder, basically, like where there are explicitly like wrong answers. Would that be good? Probably not. But
there is. I did actually play. I did play a roguelike turn-based game about moving pieces on a board, where the moves you could make were cards you were dealt, and if you didn't have the card to make the move you wanted to make, you just couldn't do it. And I think it kind of worked as far as I can recall. I can't remember what the game was called, but
is this genre called check building? Because if it's not, it should be.
Bennett Foddy, the designer of Quap and Gurup and Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy, he says, so I don't know if you know this, but it's for chefs, it's like a rite of passage or a mark of skill to make a really fucking good omelette. Like, no matter how fancy a chef you are, you have to have your take on the omelette. That and when someone wants to judge you as a chef, that's often the thing they'll test is how good of an omelette can you make. And it's not because an omelette is very difficult to make. It's just because there's, doing the basics with style and with your own touch is a mark of a good chef. And Bennett Foddy says chess is that for game designers. Like, every game designer should have their version of chess. You've got to do your take on it. And his version is speed chess, which is, it's like, I think it's a 64-player game where you have like 32 versus 32, and all of it is real time. You just make a move as fast as you can think of it. You're on two teams, and it's just complete chaos.
I think every game designer should be compelled to design a mid-noughties cover shooter.
Yeah. Cool,
for the Xbox 360.
Yeah.
It's the pinnacle of the art.
It's Gears of War, the omelette of games.
Yeah.
Right. What
have you been playing, Chris?
Oh wow! You fucking
nipped in there.
You did. I stood up to stretch my legs off the host's chair, and I've just plonked right back down in your lap. Exactly. Well, Alex, if you're going to ask like that, I'll tell you.
Okay.
I've been playing a game called... Okay.
Will you? For a moment there, it didn't seem like you would.
I mean... He's tricky, Alex. Sometimes he doesn't react at all. Incredible. I have been playing a game called Hellish Quart. Which I heard about last year when it was announced, and then Marsh reminded me of its existence this week, and that was just on time for me to have an opinion about something on this podcast. So I'm very grateful for that. So Hellish Quart is a fencing game. 2D, well, it's a 3D game, but it's a 2D fighting game format, effectively, that feels sort of distinctly modern in some ways, particularly because I think there's been an evident interest in simulating sword fighting lately, and its technology is very modern. It's physics based, with a view to realism, and all of its fighters are fighting in real European sword fighting styles with appropriate weapons, and it is a combination of very, very detailed and very kind of effectively translated mocap, and I believe a physics engine that is capable of kind of weaving in some procedural animation and things in order to kind of make sense of how bodies and swords collide and stuff. In addition to that, though, it also reminds me a lot of a much older game, which was made in a much different way, which is Bushido Blade. The PlayStation era sort of samurai fighting game. It is similarly lethal, and I think that puts it in a little family with Bushido Blade, with Nidhogg, actually. Very different game to Nidhogg, but the same, but like all of these things are expressions of the same, like, human, combat form, which is something that is, actual one-on-one sword fighting is more about sort of tempo and reach and footwork than it is about combos or, special moves. And sword fighting is probably one of the most abstracted, if we were ever asked the question, like, what aspect of human experience gets abstracted the most when it gets put in a video game, and yet always appears in video games, like sword fighting would definitely be one of them. And so these sort of realistic depictions actually have more in common with each other than I think it might be initially obvious. Like Nidhogg, it's a game about spacing and knowing when to dare to make a little stab or a slash, and when to keep your distance, and the drama and stuff comes from pushing your luck. What's really interesting about it is like how extremely lethal and pretty opaque it is. So there's no health bar because you don't really need one. If someone is bleeding, probably hurt. If they have died, they've died. And those are basically the two settings. You can get tired, but that is physically shown on your character. and is really, uninterested in kind of any kind of gamey layer beyond that. Like there's there's quite a few moves, but the physics element introduces this element of sort of kind of chance to what can happen. So like you can hit someone with a blow that just sort of like pushes their sword up and then slides past their sword into their neck, and they'll start to die. But maybe in doing that, their sword just sort of slides into one of your lungs. Now you've both died. And that's what we in the sword fighting business call a draw. And those and like it's a brutal thing to watch. Like I play a lot of Mordhau, and Mordhau is a very silly, very cursed game about screaming 4chan nerds with bad avatars, like sundering each other into many little pieces in duel servers. This is a much earlier game for many reasons, but its depiction of what it's like to be hit with a sword is quietly worse, even though it's less graphic. So, like, you can, there are instances you can, you have like high attacks and low attacks, and then high guard, but it very much depends on what kind of weapon you're holding. And you block automatically when you're at range. When you get close to each other, you no longer block automatically. Well, sword strikes don't really work anymore because you need to be a certain distance to really hit someone with the sword. There's a minimum range. And when you're in that range, you just kind of punch and kick each other. But you can also try and like slap someone's hand out of the way, or grab them. And if you grab them successfully, you kill them immediately. Like if you get grabbed during a sword fight, the other person will kill you. Like there's no getting out of that unless you're very quick. And similarly, if you bat someone's hand out of the way, you can maybe chop their hand off. But that's about as graphic as it gets in terms of that kind of like dismemberment and stuff. But instead, you have these like cuts and slashes and things that very quickly end fights that feel horrible to watch. Like the sound effects aren't really that over the top, and it's not that the characters are like audibly in pain or anything, but there's a real like to this exchange of blows being followed up by like, I don't know, just a longsword cutting across someone's face and then falling backwards onto their arse holding their like completely ruined visage. It's a lot like descriptions of people getting killed with swords in Game of Thrones sort of type violence, where it's like a flash of steel and then your noses come off.
There's something about the way the procedural animation reacts to, being skewered with a meter of steel. It, you can tell when a rapier goes through somebody's spleen, they sort of curl up like a dying spider and sort of spasm on the ground. And it doesn't need a lot of blood for that to be really deeply ugly.
Yeah. The death animations, or the death animations,
injured,
Yeah, well, they vary. Like that's one thing that's clever about it. Like if it was clearly a lethal blow, they die. But if it's just a maiming blow or something, the character occasionally like sits on the ground and seems to beg for their life, like, but in this sort of voiceless, wibbly procedural way. It's weird. Have you played it much?
Yeah, I found it very, very unreadable, which is, I think, sort of maybe part of the point in a way, that it doesn't have the very obvious tells that most fighting games have. I don't think I'll be able to play it. is the headline.
I think it's also worth stating like how early in early access it is. So it's out in early access, but that really just amounts to games against either another player who is sat with you, like same screen multiplayer, or a sort of survival mode against the AI, which is pretty rudimentary at the moment. If you go to the online multiplayer menu, it just gives you instructions for using Steam, whatever Steam's sharing mode is, where you can like effectively stream a game to someone else and then stream their inputs the other way. So if you have a good internet connection, that's an option, but it's early enough that the devs just put a tutorial for using that Steam feature to kind of effectively fake multiplayer, essentially, or fake online multiplayer. There isn't a ton else to it other than just that mode. Like there's did you click the cutscene button? Marsh?
No, I didn't. No, what is that?
So if you click story, it just plays you the opening cutscene of what will be like the story mode. Oh. And if you still got it installed, you should watch that.
Okay.
But just for the... it's not a compelling argument for narrative being a focus of this game, I think. I don't want to be mean about it, because it's like... like there's... the characters I quite like. There were this kind of like quite vividly drawn cast of like sort of like European murderers of various kinds, really, from a kind of sprightly fencer to like a big old dude with a scimitar, but they are voiced in the trailer, and sorry, in that cutscene, and it's a wild ride. You're not going to be able to guess what accent each of them has from their initial appearance.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, but the big dude, I don't know why, but he's a cowboy.
Okay.
And like, and the I think it's a Polish character. I think where he gets confronted right at the end and just replies in like thick Jason Statham, and it's like, okay. So it is definitely OP. I am enjoying it though. I kept playing, and I think there's definitely a game there, because my first couple times playing in the survival mode, I would get to like 6 duels before losing, and then I decided to try and learn the game, and that worked, and I got to 15, which I think shows that there's something to learn. It's not just random, although at the start it felt very random.
The thing is, there's a real tension in the game design there, and having played it, I'm no clearer as to how they've resolved it, or if they've resolved it, which is that obviously there's an element to which these interactions between people holding swords are physically modeled, and there is a trueness, or at least apparent trueness, to the nature of that physics that's going on. And yet the game suggests that different people holding very different weapons are also evenly matched in some way. And I don't really necessarily believe that, somebody wielding the blade of a Teutonic knight would really be evenly matched against somebody with a rapier, or vice versa. I think they would end up being very asymmetric. So I don't quite know how they've. Well, I don't know where they faked it, basically, in order to I think make these more kind of competitive.
I think the automatic block is where they faked it, because like one thing I quite like about it is like the characters have like different body types and sizes. Like the fence is really little, and some of the heavy weapon people are really tall, but the thing that feels abstract to me, even with the rudimentary experience of fencing, is the bit where you with the épée, you just kind of passive, just kind of directly block like a heavy overhead swing with a big heavy scimitar looking thing. Like I don't think you would just stop it, for example. Right. Like I think it would be a very different sort of thing. I think that's where the level of abstraction comes in.
I don't think I'm versed enough in either fighting games or swordsmanship to be able to tell where these things have been tweaked or faked. But
is there some sort of thing in the sense of realism that makes it important to you that you need to believe that it's rendering a Zweihander, the effectiveness of a Zweihander versus a Dirk kind of accurately? Like, because you probably wouldn't have going into many other fighters with that kind of attitude.
No, I don't. It's not a complaint. It's not that I want that it to be realistic. It's just I can't tell where the line is being drawn, and that makes it quite difficult for me to read and then anticipate, what's happening in the game, I think.
I would say as well, like it's worth maybe pointing out the weapons aren't that different to one another. There are some fairly significant differences, but it's not as wild as like a two-handed, a polearm over here and a dagger over here. Like it is a game about the various one-handed dueling swords of different, cultures and martial traditions. I don't think there's anything in it that isn't a sword that you hold in one hand, for example. So it doesn't feel like wildly off that they're balanced against each other, but there's definitely some abstraction. So like there are no Zweihanders and there are no Dirks. Basically, we're all in longsword territory.
Nobody rocks up with a cannon. That's how I play it. DLC.
Literally, the first thing that happens in that cutscene, though, is someone points a gun at someone else, which changes the stakes of the whole game.
That doesn't seem a wise thing to do in the very opening cutscene.
Well, you don't have to fire it. It's fine. But yeah, I like it. I think it's very niche, and I think it's sort of squarely in my interest. It's something I will dip back into, I think, as its development continues, because it certainly looks great. Really good cloth physics as well. Really good, just believable people who do. I think each of them has a little, I just won this fight thing they do, often while the other character is writhing around on the game, spasming because they've just been stabbed through the chest. And it does make them all look like assholes, but they're all really distinct in a way that makes them all really distinct, characterful assholes. And I think that's something that can be hard to achieve with both mocap and procedural animation. So to then have these moments of real personality is also cool. What you been playing, Alex?
I think Marsh and I have been playing the same game this week. I've been playing Loop Hero, which, as we're recording this, came out yesterday. It came yesterday? I think it was yesterday, wasn't it?
Maybe.
Yeah. I played it first yesterday.
My sense of time is
We're not going to go back in time with the publication of this podcast, so whatever happens, the game will still be out.
And it's a roguelike kind of auto clickery kind of strategy sort of a RPG game, which actually feels quite familiar when you actually play it. I've been enjoying it. Marsh, have you been enjoying it?
Qualified. Yeah. I think you should explain it more because I don't want to.
So, Loop Hero, you control, well, you manage a character who walks in a circle on a board, a map, a board, and on this board appear enemies. Your character automatically attacks them, goes into a little sort of fight scene, attacks them, exchanging blows until one of them dies, usually the enemy, and then continues the walk in the loop. At the end there's a little gauge for the time of day. When the next day comes, you get a little health boost. When you complete a whole loop, you return to your camp, like a fire, like a campfire, and you get a larger boost of energy, health then. And at that point, you can choose to return to your kind of base, your settlement, end your run. You generally don't want to do that because you're fundamentally going around and around and collecting resources, which you'll take back to your settlement to upgrade it. That's the basics of it. But each battle will drop two different types of things. They will drop weapons and armor and other equipment that you can put onto your fighter in order to upgrade them. And that is very important. And they will have different effects. So like if you are the warrior class, which is what you start out as, they will have things like counter, which gives a percentage chance to hit stuff back when you get hit, to regen health, a per second value. What else? Evade percentages, magic damage, being able to hit vampirism, which rewards health back again off hits, and so on and so on and so on. And so you're kind of constructing a build as you go along. You get a lot of items. It feels quite Diablo-like because you're getting a lot of items, lots of magic items. You get kind of legendaries and kind of exotic, grades of each level weaponry. And so you're constantly tossing up, what is my build? And your build will probably change enormously during a single run. So you might be focusing on an evasion one and then suddenly find you get an amazing piece of gear, which is really good at regenning health because it has vampirism and health regen. So now everything you want is like that. Or you're flighty like me and just try to have one of everything and do really badly as a result. The other type of item that you get are Well, it's kind of conceptualized as cards. They are things that you can place down on the board. There are some of them you place directly onto the path, and they, when you walk through them, will usually grant you kind of little kind of resource pickups as you go through, but it will also allow certain kinds of creatures to sort of enemies to spawn on them, usually at sun up at the start of a day or at the end of the day. I can't remember. Anyway, at specific times. There are also buildings and things that you can put around outside of the bounds of the path, such as mountains and stones. When you put these down, you'll get boosts to your health. If you can put down a stone adjacent to either a mountain or another stone, it will give you more health. If you can put stone and mountains in a 3x3 block, you will get a great big mountain and a huge dose of health and other resources that goes into your pack that you can take back to the settlement. So you're also thinking very hard about placing things carefully. There is one thing called a treasury, and a treasury you cannot place down adjacent to anything you've already placed down. And if you place down things adjacent to that once it's down, you'll get bonus items, a random bonus item. And when you can surround it with other things that come off these enemy fights, you'll get a big bonus of stuff. So lots of adjacency bonuses and all these kinds of things. Some of them are quite subtle, and some of them are unlocked by upgrading your settlement. You can build buildings there which will grant you new types of cards, which can basically go into a deck that you can set at the start of a run. And one of those things, one of the early ones that I unlocked was, I can't remember what it's called, but you can place it next to what's called a grove. And a grove is like a foresty sort of thing that you place directly onto the path. You put this thing that I can't remember the name of, you can only place them directly adjacent to one of those, but off the path. And these will kill any enemy as soon as they drop to 20% of their health. And I felt really clever with this one because when you're walking around and around this loop, and a gauge is filling up that's just by the time of day gauge. And this is the boss gauge. And when that reaches the top, a boss will spawn on your campfire point on the loop. And when you get round to the boss, you'll do a boss fight. And I've won once, and I've died quite a few times against it because it's quite tough. So you're basically just setting up your character, trying to boost it as best you can in time for the boss fight. And I thought, hey, what if I put a grove right next to the campfire and then put this thing that I can't remember the name of right next, so its area of influence is on the campfire and therefore the boss fight, which means that if I can knock the boss down to 20% of its health, it will instantly be killed. And it fucking worked. And I was really pleased with myself because I would have died otherwise, because I was very close to death, and I managed to take it down to 20% on my last hit. So that was good. So there's lots of strategy there, but what it ultimately means is that you're playing two games at once. One, the kind of Diablo-like build your character as you go along style game, kind of, sort of muddling your way through and taking opportunities as they come up. And then you're also playing this puzzle game about placing things down that are randomly dropping in order to maximize their benefits. There are loads of sort of little synergistic things, like there's these crystal things that some building unlocked for me, which if I can place them down directly next to my path, and then a meadow type, if I put them within their area of influence next to them, I will get more health. I've doubled health for each of those meadows when the next day comes, for instance. That probably was pretty garbled to anyone who's played the game, but there's loads of stuff you're thinking about. But that's the game, I think, Marty. Is that right?
Yeah, there's also a meta layer where these are sort of expeditions that you're doing. And at any point, if you die or if you just want to get out, you can scarper back to your campsite, which you eventually build up. And the more things you build at your campsite with the resources you've got from your expeditions, the kind of better starting situation you have for those expeditions. And so you're sort of grinding in order to improve your campsite so that you can basically unlock variety in the individual expeditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I go on. Sorry.
I found it very beguiling at first. I really admire the way it's put together. Like the conceit of the loop. I mean, it's sort of like an RPG where you're exploring a landscape, but instead of exploring it, you're actually placing the things that will challenge you.
Yeah.
So, you unlock a card which spawns enemies, but you need to fight enemies in order to get loot. So you place and you're on this constant tension of, well, obviously I need to place these badass enemies in order to fight them and get their lovely resources, but you don't want to put too many because then obviously that becomes an actual challenge which you might not be able to
I'm going to put some vampires down here. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
It's going to be a good time.
Oh no, there are vampires.
Me sowing, me reaping. But yeah, I really like the way you stack up geographical resources to give you buffs. I think that's really, really cool. And the way, because you have a limited space in which to place them, the way that you need to place them to get your adjacency bonuses needs to be thought through a little bit. I like the way the loot stats stack. I like the way that you slowly get this emerging build from any single expeditions. But having played it for a few hours now, I have to say the pace of it is feeling quite slow. Like the number of meaningful decisions that I'm now making seems to be too few to keep my attention. And I know I'm sort of in a grind where I just need to get my campsite up so I can basically unlock variety in the expeditions. But the speed at which I'm gaining resources to boost my campsite feels very meager. And I just I can see where the end point is. I can see in the distance, there's a distant decision that I'll get to make in an hour's time. And I just think, well, why can't I just skip to that? Just make the decision. Because between now and then, I mean, I know you can chop and change and create different builds, but I found a relatively, maybe not in the optimal way, but it's a reasonably productive way to accrue resources during an expedition with minimal risk. And I'm just going to do that now. And it doesn't really matter what the game throws at me. The choices that I am going to make are already set in the future. And I don't feel like any high-level decisions are going to change the course of that expedition unless it throws in something new, which it does occasionally, but not nearly frequently enough. I mean, it's to the point where it's almost an idle game. It would be very, very easy to automate. You could automate your entire playthrough of a single expedition with a single if then else statement, I think. And it's, but you have to be attentive because you need to be placing cards that you're getting and equipping loot. But just, if you know that you're going to go for a regen build and you'd basically be mad not to, I think, then there's no real choice going on there. You just look at a new item and says, does it have regen? Then I'm not going to use it, if it doesn't. It's weird. I don't know where it's, maybe it'll unlock some new stage of the game where I feel like I'm being asked to interact more. Because I really love the idea. I love the neatness of the execution, and I like the art and everything else. But it's just not asking quite enough of me to keep me engaged.
Which class are you using most?
I haven't unlocked any other classes.
Oh, haven't you?
I'm still using the warrior.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't. I think there are two classes, three classes. The next class you'll get was probably be the rogue. Is it called a rogue in this? Right. It's like the equipment that you can put onto the rogue is different. So it's no shield but 2 weapons. So hits really hard. The bonus, like the bonuses and things are different. So there's a critical attack, lots of things. There are 2 gauges. It's like there are loads of different mechanics going on. Like it plays quite differently, and I haven't completed a run with it because I had to run down to dinner tonight before completing it, and it didn't save my place. But in this one, you don't get many drops of equipment as you go around the loop but you do get these kind of goods. You get this bag in your inventory, and it fills with this number of stuff goes into it as you defeat enemies. And then when you complete a loop, or is it the end of the day? I haven't quite figured it out. Or is it when you visit a village, which is another thing that you can put down on the thing? No, so I should go into why I sound so sort of full of indecision, because it's actually part of the game as well. But you suddenly get like your entire inventory fills up with stuff, and you suddenly get this glut of stuff that you can stick on your character. It feels very different. And there's an XP thing, and I haven't completed the XP bar yet, so I don't know what that does. And actually, there's loads of weird things that happen as a result of things you put down. So what I didn't realize until reading about it was that the reason why harpies appeared suddenly out of the blue is that I'd put down a certain number of stone tiles on the board, and that only happens then. And so there are certain things that
they become a mountain, don't they?
Sorry,
they kind of coalesce into a larger mountain, which is where the harpies are said to
That's
roost.
right, yeah. And I think there's another thing that happens. That's when the goblins turn up. So there are these. Your actions will lead to certain things, and once you know that, then you may or may not, because you can keep cards in your just sitting there not being played if you like, and you actually, I think you get items if you overfill your hand. So you don't have to play stuff. So I think there are more decisions, or at least there's more going on than meets the eye. And but I am wondering as well whether that'll actually come to mean anything, because I agree. From playing the warrior, it was all pretty straightforward, and
I played the demo of this, and my experience was closer to Marsh's. And I think so. Apparently, the demo, even early on, the full game has some stuff the demo doesn't. But in the demo, I didn't feel like I had any decisions really. Like every decision was just like where should I place this rock? Well, it gets a bonus if it's next to another rock, and there's no other features, so I'll place it next to the other rock. And where should I place this meadow? Well, a meadow gets a bonus if it's next to another meadow, so okay, I'll place it next to the meadow. And then, like you say, Marsh, like I gone for like a vampirism focus, because that just seemed like sustainability, like being able to top up your own health was super important. And so if I had that, basically I wouldn't need anything else, so I just stacked on vampirism every chance I got. So again, all my loot decisions were pretty trivial. And that thing you were saying, Alex, about the thing whose name cannot be remembered that goes next to a forest that kills people when they are on 20% health. That sounds
really blood grove, isn't it? Blood
grove or blood
swamp, something or other.
That sounds that kind of decision making sounds really cool, and I want that, but I never hit anything like that. And even I did place a forest, but nobody told me anything about why I would want to place a forest here rather than there. Like the decisions were divided into things where it's a no-brainer and you should always do X, versus things where maybe there is some reason I should place this in a specific spot, but I'm not given any information about that, and I'd only learn it through getting way further into the game. And after about an hour with it, I had no reason to carry on.
Yeah, I think it wants you to be wondering, is there any reason why I'd put a cemetery here as opposed to there anywhere in the loop? And I think that it wants you to discover the answer to that as you play. And whether there is a satisfying answer to this, I don't know yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that maybe not. I mean, I've definitely found the boards I've rolled have been fairly awkward in places where they weren't good places to put meadows, or I was saving up cards because I hadn't had a treasury yet. And that meant that I wasn't getting health bonuses until late into the game, or like a third into a run, because I wanted to put all these rocks I was accruing around a treasury for extra biz. The thing that disquiets me most about it is so the end game thing, which is do you run or do you continue? Because if you die, you lose 70% of all the stuff you accrued. which feels pretty bad. Like, it definitely serves the idea of, shall I run? Shall I, cut my losses, or shall I risk it? That's what I guess they want. But it feels bad. It doesn't feel nice. It just, you've invested, 20 minutes, half an hour into a run, and you kind of got a bag full of stuff, and you don't want to lose that shit.
You don't really want to push the player to bet against themselves. Like, if players are already going to want to be cautious, and when you say, like, if you take any risk at all, there's a chance you'll lose a massive amount of stuff permanently. Yeah. Then you're just pushing the player to just be boring. Just like, okay, I'll stop at every.
Which is what I did. Like, I killed the boss, and you can continue. You continue after the boss. Like, there's clearly it continues, but I cut and lost, and I felt shit about that, to be honest, because that wasn't a nice feeling. There is an item. There is an item which grants you can spend to allow you to have all the loot. I don't know how I got that item. I didn't buy it, so I didn't really feel any sense of achievement from using it. I don't know whether I used it effectively. I just saw the option and did it. So again, that was a bit odd.
Yeah, I died to the boss the first time I had the chance to fight him because, I didn't expect the game to punish me for experimentation. But it does. It punished me to the tune of 70% of all the loot that I accrued. And I'm just not going to do it again until I'm absolutely certain I can tonk him. And that means I'm just going to have a lot of grinding to do. And that fucking sucks. I don't know why it would why the game would sort of insist upon that. Really.
Yeah. I felt that the one build, the one time I did beat the boss, it wasn't as a result particularly, other than the Blood Grove thing, the name, the thing that we can't remember. Other than that, I didn't have any bonuses that I'd earned outside of the run. It was all just because I had a good build from that run, apparently. So that's in its favour.
Oh, so you mean it's always possible?
I think it's always possible. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's just how hard you can hit and how much you can avoid getting it in return, I guess. I love the art, and I really don't like the words. So it's presented like a kind of a weird Commodore 64-ish sort of game, pixel graphics. By default, it has this sort of CRT effect, sort of. So it's got these scan lines, and but
I thought you'd like that.
It's subtly done. I do like that.
Enough to tempt you away from your Mister.
Yeah, straight back to a Mister style thing. But the color palette is really muted and really controlled, so it feels really true to its visual kind of inspiration, and that feels good. I really like the character art and the art of the board itself. That's good. What do you think, Marty?
Yeah, it's gorgeous to look at. Yeah,
but there's a lot of text, and it's pretty badly written. I feel it wants to tell you a story about good and evil, and are we the bad guy and stuff like that. And I'm just like, no.
Yeah, I started skipping it fairly early on, and once you start skipping text in a game, the text no longer has any opportunity to redeem itself. And so that's it, really. If you don't start strong, you're dead to me.
To be fair, if you are actively creating vampires for you to fight, maybe you are the bad guy. I'm just
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Are the other developers native English speakers?
I don't think so. I think could be totally wrong here, but I think they're Russian.
That would feel right, because there are some. There's one of the problems I have with it is that the descriptions of what cards do sometimes don't differentiate between whether they're going to affect you or whether they're going to affect enemies.
Yeah. For me, it was the beacons that says that it doubles the attack the attack speed.
Oh yeah, of units.
Yeah. Like is that everyone or me? And if it's everybody, why the fuck would you know? It makes no difference. Who benefits? Nobody. We just do it faster.
Game over faster.
yeah, exactly. That's it.
Just get this over with.
But I think it does affect everybody, which is, I don't know. I still don't understand that. But I don't know. If in all this mystery we figured them out and it leads to more decisions, I would say it's a really good game. If there within all this mystery is nothing, then it probably isn't a good game.
Jury's out, folks.
What you been playing, Tom?
I have been playing Terraforming Mars, which is a board game originally. My friend Lulu got me into the board game last weekend, and we played it. We played the physical version, and that takes like 3+ hours because it's a big fucking complex Euro game with a lot of fucking tokens, and it's just everything. It's like a maximalist game. I am really into Race for the Galaxy, which I've talked about a little bit, I think, before on the podcast, which is a deck building card game where you sort of build a tableau and you get your production online and all this stuff. This is all of that plus a hex-based like a building game as well. And so the premise is that you're trying to make Mars habitable, and a key part of that is that there are 3 different axes on which you need to improve Mars. Mars is too cold, doesn't have enough oxygen, doesn't have enough water. So you are trying to increase the temperature, you're trying to increase the oxygen, you're trying to place water. And water is a thing you're actually going to place on the map. The other 2 are things that you're just going to sort of raise a bar. And every time you do that, you go up your terraforming rating improves, which is both victory points at the end of the game, and it's also your income every turn. So you are racing to get the most credit for improving Mars, basically. Like, I want to improve the temperature before temperature is actually optimal, because after that point, you no longer get any points for it. And that's kind of the clever thing about it, especially compared to Race for the Galaxy, where Race for the Galaxy just has victory points, and if you can get victory points, you always want them, and they're always good, and so anything that's good is good forever. In Terraforming Mars, each different way of getting credit for improving Mars is going to run out at some point during the game. There's only 3 of them, and once Mars is at a good enough temperature, I think it's 8 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough. You don't need to be hotter than that. If you need to be any hotter than that, you're just being fussy. So after that point, there is no credit for improving the temperature of Mars. So if you do like, it's a game where you have, all these different resources, and for every resource, you have both how much of it you have on hand and also how much you're producing each turn. So cards that improve your production are obviously great early on, because every turn for the rest of the game, you're going to be getting more stuff. But one of those is heat, and improving your heat production, great early on, because there's loads of temperature increases that need to happen, and you'll get credit for all of them, the ones you do. But there comes a time, and it tends to be heat that maxes out first, where we're at 8 degrees Celsius, we don't need any more heat. And so all of your heat production is now going to waste. And there aren't a lot of ways to convert heat into anything else good. So every game, basically, you have to pivot. And that's a really interesting thing about it from a game design point of view, especially like deck builders. And I played a lot of digital card games at this point, and a fair few board games that involve it too. And this, more than any other I can think of, just demands that you are going to change your empire during the game. You're going to have to, you don't have to specialize in one thing early on. You could do a sort of good all-rounder thing throughout, but if you do specialize, you're going to have to change your specialty, because at some point you'll max out all the credit you can get from it. So yeah, this is a board game originally. It's on Steam, there's a digital version, and it's also on iPad. So I bought it on Steam and then discovered it was on iPad and bought it on iPad immediately after, because if I can get away from my computer to play something like this, then I will. But those 2 versions are the same. And the digital version has AI you can play against. And that's absolute catnip for me. That's because I love these games, but finding 3 hours with a friend to sit down and do it just doesn't happen very often. It's a rare thing. So I don't get to iterate. I don't get to try the possibilities and actually really meaningfully improve at these games, unless there's a digital one where I can just be pitted against an AI. And just like Race for the Galaxy, the difference in the time it takes to play one game is extraordinary when it's digital, because like I say, the real life game is like 3+ hours, might have even been like 4 hours, because I was learning the game for the first time. and then the digital version is like 40 minutes, if that. And as you get better at it, it gets down to like half an hour. And I love figuring out these systems, and it's got all of the appeal of something like Slay the Spire, where the cards you're being dealt are pushing you to figure out a way to select them intelligently so that they synergize with each other and you get a build that really works. But then it has this extra aspect of whatever you specialize in, you're probably going to have to change into specialize in something else later. And there are cards set up to do that. Like there's one card that will take all of your heat production as much of your heat production as you like and turn it into money production instead, which is fantastic if you specialize in heat production and then you want to pivot your whole empire into something else because money's good for everything. I'm playing against the AI. The AI seems pretty good so far. I lost my first game to an easy AI, so that's a good sign. And it goes up to hard, and I'm currently struggling with medium. I've sometimes beaten medium, not always. They're a little bit similar in how they play. Like there is one move the AI loves to do, and they'll always do it first, which is to place an ocean in a certain spot where if you place an ocean in this spot, you get 2 cards back. And I guess that seems like a good trade-off. I didn't go for it in the real life game. And the AI will always do that if it can. But one thing I love about playing against AI is I can really enjoy beating them. That's the thing I don't get with human opponents. Like human opponents, I don't like to lose, but I also don't love to win. Like I don't really like beating somebody unless it's looked like I'm going to lose for the whole game. Like the only really satisfying outcome for a game is for me to think I'm going to lose the whole game, then right at the last minute pull it out. Whereas versus AI, I just want to crush them over and over again. I want them to lose every single time. If they lose by a humiliating margin, that's fantastic because they're not people. I don't have to feel bad about it, and I can just engage all of my mechanics brain and be totally merciless. And so there's a really nice mechanic in this game called awards, and at any time anybody can sponsor an award, and that means you pay some money right now, and at the end of the game, whoever you choose a category for the award, like is it the most heat produced, or is it the most steel and iron, or is it how much land you own, or is it how much your money production is? Whatever category you pick, at the end of the game, whoever is best at that then will get 5 victory points. And 5 victory points is a lot. I think it's the biggest single victory point gain you can have from a single action, is to sponsor an award and then at the end of the game win it. And there's a really nice risk-reward thing with this because you can only 3 awards can be funded in the whole game, and the first one is really cheap. It's only 8 money. The next one to be funded is going to cost 14 money, and the next one is going to be, I think, 20. And so these get more expensive as the more of them have been backed, so you're pushed to do it early, because if your enemy starts to back an award, then whatever category you were hoping to win in, you've got to now pay more to fund that award. But of course, the earlier you back it, the less certainty there is that you'll win. Like, okay, you're in the lead now, but will you always be in the lead for this? And it turns out the easy AI, at least, loves these awards. It's also really fucking good at. There's another category called milestones where you just get it right now. Like if you have 3 cities, you get the milestone, you get 5 victory points, and it's a huge advantage. And the AI is really good at remembering to do that as soon as it possibly can. And me, a human, is really bad at remembering to do that. And so it always wins that category. But awards, it will remember sooner than I do to go for them. Like, oh shit, they're in the lead for this category, so they're going to get an award, and they get it before I do, so that I'm like, shit, now if I want to fund an award, it's going to cost me more money. I don't know if it's really worth it. And so the AI did this. He got like 2 of the 3 milestones, and then he backed 2 awards. And that means there's only 1 award that I could possibly fund at this point. And he's gone for the awards for like most steel produced and most heat produced. And that's your final balance of those resources. So it's not just how much you produced over the course of the game, but it's how much do you have left over? Like, did you spend any of it? And sure enough, he's beating me in both those categories. He's definitely doing better at both those things by a lot, like more than 50% of mine. But it's like halfway through the game, he's done it pretty early. And I look at these things and I think, like, that is not what I'm specializing in. He's specializing that, I'm not. But I could. Like, I could just change my whole empire to just, like, mine steel and produce heat. Even though I don't even need heat to improve Mars at this point. Like, that is over. The temperature bar is pretty much filled. There's no more actual virtuous reason to produce heat. except that I beat this motherfucker, and he has bet some money that he's going to be best at heat. And I think I can just devote my whole game to beating him on the two things he thinks he's best at, because that's not his whole empire. He's got other things going on, and he's also trying to like build cities and build greeneries and stuff. And if I just decide to change my entire focus to what he thinks he's good at, then not only do I get 5 points for winning the award, but he doesn't get 5 points, which is effectively me getting 10 points in a 2-player game. That's twice as good as something that just gets you 5 points. So that's an insane win. Like gaining 10 points over your enemy is, like I say, that's twice the biggest single move you can do in the game. And if I can do it for both awards simultaneously, that's just an astronomical advantage. And so I just devoted everything into like, I'm going to actually create a mine right now. I'm going to sell a couple of cards so that I can afford this thing that gains me a bunch of titanium. My heat production that I didn't really care about, I've actually had a card on the back burner. I was probably going to get rid of it at some point that just gives me 7 heat production. I'm going to get that, even though we don't need any more temperature, even though Mars is hot enough. I'm just going to focus my whole empire on this just to beat this guy at the thing he's good at. And it worked. By the end of the game, I actually beat him on heat production and steel production. And that just means not only did I get the 20 points over him that I otherwise wouldn't have, but also he paid for those. Like he put money down for those awards. And there's like such a Schadenfreude thrill to like, you paid for me to just beat you by 20.
Do you think in real life, like if that scenario had played out in a tabletop game, I appreciate you gestured at this, do you think you would be capable of that play?
Capable is an interesting word. I wouldn't enjoy it.
Chosen.
Yeah. I wouldn't feel good about it. Like,
but you would
like, yeah. Well, I wouldn't pivot my whole empire to do it, because it's a real spiteful thing to do. It's a gamble as well. I might fail to do it, and that's against a real person in a social situation. You bet the whole game on a spiteful move to try and like destroy somebody for your own benefit, and then you also fail at it. Like that's a pretty bad day.
Good day for them, though. You know.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm definitely like, I hate. I don't know, especially when I'm already winning in a game, I hate sort of having to tell somebody that something has worked out to my advantage. Like, I'm afraid by doing this, I actually get to steal all of your money production. And
I'm glad you reserved this for the AIs, because had you not had that compunction, you would be a monster, Tom.
I know. You see, I think when if you're with people that you're very comfortable with and you all agree, then you can play tabletop games or board games in ruthless mode, and that could be fun.
This is why we don't play board games together, Chris.
Well,
except Hundreds of Horses, obviously.
The best board game, yeah, exactly. Indeed. But like because that moment where if you'd made that bet and it had gone wrong, everyone enjoys that. That's a good memory,
I don't enjoy it.
Right. Well, but like sometimes you need a heal, is what I'm saying. And I'm glad that this digital version of the game is allowing you to be a heel in a safe environment.
Yeah, that's where I like to be.
Yeah, exactly.
I think so. There are definitely board games, especially that are like designed around this. Like the whole point of the board game is to be an absolute bastard to your friends, and that is how you play it. And in those, I'm fine with it. It's like, all right, I'm doing this. I might be apologetic as I'm doing it, but I'm going to do it because it's the whole game. Whereas this one, like you can win by making a really nice empire that works really well, and your production will make sense, and you play the right cards at smart times, and you just do well, and they don't do as well, and so you win. And it's a real fucking choice to say the thing you're most proud of about your empire, the thing you think is best, I can do that better now, even though I'm trying to do that.
All I'm saying is you still have the compulsion.
It's in there. I also played Airborne Kingdom. Has anyone played that?
No.
It's a city builder where your city is big flying thing. It's got some balloons on it. It's got some fans on it. And it's wafting around.
A classic BioShock scenario.
Yeah, it is a bit. Visually, though, it looks like the Game of Thrones opening credits. They're sort of like very like sharp-edged layers, sort of contours. Model city kind of thing,
like a papercraft kind of thing.
Yeah, and this is it's a city builder that doesn't have a lot in the way of pressure. So, in theory, like the only pressure is that you need coal to stay afloat, and if you run out of coal, I assume that's just game over. It's never happened.
That's quite a lot of pressure for a city.
It does,
have.
yeah,
Like...
it does. It does. It sounds bad, but actually in play, it's just so far from ever happening. Like, it's never even come close. I never even had to think about it really. It's just like the only thing I think about is like, I'm not currently completely maxed out on coal. I guess I'll go get that coal because I'm at 39 out of 40 and I've never been below 20. It's really easy to stay afloat. And that's the design philosophy of the game, I think, has been to like never really put your feet to the fire. You're always just being asked, like, how do you want this city to be built, and what do you want to specialize in? And it's you're building like paths out from your main, engine, and then adding on things like hangars, and hangars have planes in them that your citizens can then fly out and gather resources from the ground, because all the resources are on the ground. So they're just your workers going out and fetching resources. Then you can build stuff like housing for your people. You kind of need one house per person, and how you stack that and how you arrange that to be sort of optimal is a thing. And then as you're building this empire, tilt becomes a factor, because if you build too much on one side of it, your whole thing starts to tilt in the air, and that makes you move slower. I think it might even make your citizens less happy because they're on a fucking slope.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Like, I used to live up a hill, but now I do.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't think it does affect things on this level, but I'd love it if it just took citizens longer to get from the left edge to the right edge. But yeah, that's the thing. Like, every time you play something, you're told what the tilt implications of this will be, and you want to build out evenly on both sides, and then front and back tilt is also a thing, and then lift becomes a thing. Like, now you just got too much weight, and you need to build more like upward fans to keep you afloat. But really, the cool thing about it is just that this is a city builder where you can move, and the whole terrain is a bunch of little patches of resources that run dry when you harvest them after a while. And so then you just sort of waft out into the unknown and go look for new patches of resources. And as you go, you find little settlements and temples and stuff that all have followers that can join you, and ancient artifacts that have some benefit to you. You find big ground-based civilizations who you are trying to ally with, and they will have quests for you, like, oh, we've got this wind farm out here that broke down. Can you go and fix it for us? And because you're a flying city, the answer is yeah, sure. More than any other city, I can do this. And yeah, it's just a really nice, it's a very relaxing game, very chill pace. Everything is always just getting better. Basically, you never really suffer any adversity. You're just making your empire better and better. And it's really cool to be able to like play a city builder where you're also exploring, and not exploring by sending out a guy and then having to send him back, but you just send your whole city into a new unknown place. And I just got to a point where I've allied with the 3 civilizations in the starting area who are it's all pretty easy to float between them. And the next area is the shallows, which is there's water everywhere. And there's still resources there, but coal is less common. And coal, like I say, is the one that keeps you afloat. It's the one that you really need. And so you're basically advised to kind of spend a while in the opening area, upgrading not just gathering coal, but also upgrading your capacity to store coal, because you can also upgrade your storage for each of these things. And that's true for like your wood resources that you're gathering, your food, your water, all these different things. So it has this nice feeling of like preparing for a big journey. I haven't done it yet, but that's the next thing for me to do, is to like really upgrade my coal capacity and make sure my ship or my city can fly for a really long time without having to resupply. And I almost wanted to go further in that direction, because that feels really nice. Like, I really like thinking of this more as a ship than a city, and specializing that ship to do something in particular. You can kind of do that. Like, one of the things you can upgrade is propulsion. So if you want to move faster, that's the thing you can specialize in. And it's never essential to do that, but it's kind of fun to just to have the idea of like, I want to make a really sleek city. Like, if you also, the smaller you make it, the faster you'll go. I think tilt is a factor in that. I'm not sure whether it counts like width against you, whether like having a narrow, long city would be faster than a wide, flat city. It might well do, because they do measure stuff like that. And yeah, that's a really fun thing to play around with. It's really relaxing. It's really beautiful to look at. And it actually feels like meaningfully better than a regular city builder to me. Like, I've played a lot of chill city builders and they're fun, but having this extra dimension of I'm actually traveling as I'm doing it is really nice.
Have you played Before We Leave, Tom?
No, I haven't actually. That's next on my list.
Yeah, I played that a little bit. I'm sort of not really ready to talk about it because, but it's another cute low pressure city builder. About coming out of, in this case, you're coming out of a vault, like it's the end of the apocalypse, and you're coming out again to repopulate. And this is like much more about very constrained space. So you're on a hex grid, and you're going to need to use your space very wisely because certain things need to be built in very specific places, and you're kind of competing for space against the resources you need as well. But it's very beautiful as well, kind of a sort of tilt shift effect on the images,
Yeah, that one's like, it's on a spherical planet, right? You can sort of...
Yeah, that's right. You zoom out and you kind of see this thing. Yeah, the curve. I find it a little bit distracting, I must admit, in the little curve, because you just constantly feel you can't quite see enough because it's blurring out the foreground and the background. And your curvature means you don't have a clear view of the things that are on the edge of the view. Yeah, it's
sadly, that is my feeling. That was my feeling about Planetary Annihilation, which is the Total Annihilation successor,
right.
That was kickstarted. And it looks super cool in screenshots and stuff, but then you play it and you're like, I just really want an overview. I just really want to see an actual fucking map. Because with a sphere, you can never see all of it, and it's just annoying to not be able to see all of what's going on.
Yeah, well, you zoom right in on this one, but there's just constant niggling feeling that you're not quite seeing as much as you feel you ought to. But it's quite a visually busy image. It's very beautiful, but there's the distinction between buildings is not that easy to discern, especially at a distance. But anyway, I haven't really played that much yet, so I can't really speak much further about it.
Yeah, I'm definitely planning to play that.
Have you played anything else, Marty?
I have, I've been playing Hrot.
I'm sorry? How dare you?
I just realised that I have as well. Yes.
It means a nail, I think, or a point in Czech. But Hrot, yeah, it's a first-person shooter, sort of throwback to sort of Quake 1 era of polygonal density. Although it's not actually on a retro engine, it's on a custom engine that's been built in Pascal by a single developer from, in fact, the Czech Republic. And it's about the Czech Republic, sort of.
These coincidences keep piling up.
I know. Or rather, it's actually about Czechoslovakia, as it was known, in 1986, which is when it's supposedly set. Although it's not really set in Czechoslovakia from 1986, because it's actually set in a very heightened, exaggeratedly horrible Soviet horror version of Czechoslovakia, where everything is this uniform Quake brown, and the only food you can eat are tins of blood and fat.
I don't know what the problem is.
And everyone, even horses, are forced to wear gas masks. But I feel like this is like a particular aesthetic in the horror that comes out of post-communist states, but I don't know if it has like a proper genre name. It's some sort of like histrionic but slightly self-aware Soviet miserablism. Which is not to say that the Soviet rule in those countries wasn't like a bad time, but like the grim aesthetic here is mutated and metastasized into something, more appreciably horror. It's like otherworldly and feverish and sort of, but at the same time knowingly absurd. I mean, the enemies you fight aren't just communists in gas masks. They sort of inhuman, and they sort of snuffle and grunt and groan and wheeze like monsters from a creature feature. But you're also as likely to be attacked by a suddenly animated Soviet sculpture of a gorilla, for example, or horses wearing gas masks. And at one point, a gymnasium pommel horse comes alive and kicks the shit out of you. So it's clearly a horror game, but it's also very, very weird and quite funny. One of the interactions you have as an option is to kiss portraits of the politician Gustav Husak, for example. I don't know why. And it's got
they were just trying to head off the inevitable criticism it would receive in its Edge review.
Why couldn't you? If only we could
Can't you simply kiss the portraits?
It has some great sound effects as well. And there's this one enemy who charges at you holding this explosive barrel. And he announces himself with probably my favorite comedy scream in a game. It's just like this, fantastic. But the other thing about it that I really like is how good, like the low poly, the sort of Quake equivalent engine with its Quake equivalent palette of colors, how good that is at rendering graceless fucking communist slabs. It's arguably a lot better than Quake itself was at rendering medieval or futuristic architecture. And it's almost weird that no one has hit on using those engines to create, grievously utile communist carbuncles at the previous time. The kind of buildings that Alex wishes everybody lived in. Just grim, grimy slabs devoid of any human warmth whatsoever. But yeah, there's something really funny about, the game announcing that the next level is the Ministry of Culture, only for it to reveal itself as just the bleakest concrete cuboid with iron doors and grilled windows. And I don't know. I find it very funny. I think it's meant to be funny, but yeah. But outside of all that, it's also just a fun, briskly paced, well-balanced retro shooter of a fairly mindless kind, I suppose, but it's not just retro in the way it looks either. It's mining a lot of the cliches of that era, sort of monster closets and all, which isn't necessarily something I'd normally go for, but I think it uses those tropes in a fairly relatively sort of refined way with the many years of hindsight that we now have. But it's the setting that really makes it feel fun and different.
We might have to rethink the chick builder genre. Got an interesting variety of laughs for that one. I see it's overwhelmingly positive on Steam, which speaks well of it.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, it is in early access, but I don't know why you wouldn't buy it now. It feels quite complete and polished. There are a few things where I think it doesn't signpost some stuff as well as it could, but it is sort of it's almost, you remember back in the Doom days and you didn't necessarily know where to go next, and you had to sort of bring up your map and then pore over it for the areas that you hadn't quite been to yet. I mean, it's hard to know whether that's a failure or a feature, but it's definitely in there, that kind of befuddlement. But yeah, liked it.
Sounds like it gets a little kiss from you.
It does.
Just noise-based reviews for games from now on.
I mean, we've been there for a while now. We've been there 360 episodes of that, I guess.
I've got to have a noise for my Terraforming Mars award sniping behavior. I regret that immediately.
that had like how the rat in Ratatouille hears humans initially. Energy. I would need a noise for what it's like when you lose in Hellish Quart, but you impale the other person as well, and therefore it is a draw and you'll get to have another go. Which would be like, I regret that as well. I don't know why I decided to follow you in this hole.
Shall we do some questions from questions?
I think we will. Shall I begin?
Yes.
All right.
Tell us the questions.
Toivo writes, Dear Crate and Crobe R, What is the most captivating game with the least amount of player input that you can recommend? Thanks.
Loop Hero would be a new contender.
There's a game that Loop Hero has been compared to already called Progress Quest, which was a entirely non-interactive RPG, which I actually really liked. I was surprised that robbing me of all interactivity did not rob me of all fun. Like, I was actually quite content to watch these bars go up and stuff. And I think Loop Hero almost suffers by comparison for me. Like, it wants me to do stuff, but like I say, in the hour I played, I wasn't aware of any interesting decisions I could be making. And so part of me was like, well, can you just play it for me then? Like, if I don't have any difficult dilemmas to solve, then I would rather you just streamlined all of this away and let me just watch numbers go up.
I would put DEFCON in its real-time mode in this bracket.
Yeah, were you on the PC Gamer real-time day of that?
I wasn't. I think that was just before my time, actually. But that is the kind of experience I'm thinking about.
The absolute folly to think that let's try this real-time mode for DEFCON, and we'll just have it running in the background while we get on with our work days. And then we'll just check in on it, every hour, half hour, whatever. And of course, all of us just spent 100% of our time obsessing over it, because it turns out it will expand to fill, whatever time it takes. No matter how slow it is, you still need to know the second someone launches a nuke.
Yeah, it's low input, but not low involvement.
Yeah. I also I really like Universal Paperclips, which is Frank Lance's. It's the closest to an idle/clicker game that I've really got into and seen all the way through. And yeah, the input it's not close to zero. It's definitely you're managing a thing and deciding what upgrades you want to get, but a lot of it is just ticking away and numbers going up, and it's all about exponential increases. And it's based, for anyone who doesn't know, it's based on a sort of classic AI thought experiment that says, one of the reasons you should be careful of AI is if you make an AI that is tasked with producing as many paperclips as possible, one of the first things it might do is destroy the human race so that no one can stop it from producing paperclips ever.
There's quite a lot
where you do that.
There's quite a lot of stuff that you have to do in that one, actually. If there's any criticism I have of it, is that within this format of, an idle game, you do have to do quite a lot of quite involved interaction to progress things.
Yeah, definitely compared to other idle games, it's not low input, but compared to...
It is super clever, though. It's really fun and surprising and goes places.
Our next question comes from Ben, who writes, "Dear people who are wrong," which is just a sunny greeting. "You're all wrong about the best item in a game. It is, in fact, the folding scythe from Grim Fandango. The clickety-clack as it unfolds, the little tap on the floor, and the sound I can only refer to as a doom schwang. All that, plus the fact that it fits into a leather jacket, perfection, or jacket pocket. What the fuck am I talking about? A question? All right then. What's your favourite word that only gets used in games to make them sound clever? Mine's probably chitin, or maybe viscera. Love, from Ben."
Chitin.
So I don't know if this qualifies, but definitely, because those two are words that you commonly see in video games and less so elsewhere. You see them a lot in fantasy novels, actually. But yeah, game-specific words, the words that most uniquely gamey for me are pauldron and cuirass. I don't think I've ever heard those outside of video games. And I was super into medieval arms and armor when I was a kid. I read up on all this stuff. And
how about hauberk? How are you with the hauberk?
Love a good hauberk, me.
Yeah, I think I would put sundered in this category. I think people rarely describe broken things in real life as my car has been sundered.
But they should.
They should, yeah.
And actually, cleave is in almost every fantasy game ever made.
Means lots of different things as well.
Oh man, that fucking asshole on the A20 cleaved my car in twain.
I think maybe depths as a word to describe like a lower level of a place.
Yeah. I'm going to the depths of the house to access the front door.
Go to the depths of Staples.
Exactly. Maybe people do say that, actually. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Like, I feel like that was a sentence I would say. A lot of this is located in that kind of medieval fantasy world, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
There's got to be quite a lot of military jargon, that Clancyisms of some sorts, right? In fact, I tell you what, there was a kind of entertainingly stiff playthrough of the first-person addition to the Elite that's forthcoming, and it involved 3 men very gamely trying to make it sound more exciting than it was, using lots of sort of almost like pseudo kind of military jargon, but just casual, like military cash.
Yeah, it was really very, very just over the line in kind of day to day, but it was so close, wasn't it?
So just over the line into like TA.
Yeah, it's TA. Yeah,
right.
They're like, oh, we've got to get that extract soon. They're already stacking up on the door, and the enemy AI just kind of wanders into the opening and stands still, shooting and missing for like 3 seconds. Yep, we're in mortal peril here.
Yeah, guys, I'll go to the extraction point. Yeah, that kind of thing.
By which I mean my Uber's here.
Yeah,
that's the LZ.
That I was. I've been playing Elite Dangerous with friend of the show, Owen Jones, and I'm excited by getting to run around on planets. But I never wanted this to be a first-person shooter. So yeah, I hope not too many resources being put into that stuff.
I think maybe I engage with the word farming in the games context far more than I would ever even consider. Like, I don't consider myself to farm anything in real life, but I definitely perform repetitive tasks in return for small resource gains, right? Maybe that is a usage that I'd like to see crossover.
Just going to farm some salary.
Yeah, I just need to farm some money for 8 hours, and then I'll be free. Just
grinding out an illustration.
Yeah, exactly.
What was that film with Gerard Butler that you watched the other day, Chris?
Oh, Greenland.
Because that has, in the trailer, there's just, I don't know why this tickled me so much, but it cuts to a newsreel, and obviously a meteorite's about to hit the Earth. And the newscaster is saying, this is an extinction-level event. And I just thought, why would you use such a weird sciencey term for it, rather than, we're all going to fucking die?
Right, there's the other way that expresses itself. That's a weird film. I don't want to go off on one too much about it, but like, I quite enjoyed it as a quite a detailed and very kind of ground level. I don't think there are definitely dramatic character moments in it, but I think it's the roller coaster that the characters go on is maybe slightly too unrealistic for it to be as like a realistic depiction of one person's experience at the end of the world. But it's very like ground level and almost like simulationist in its approach in a way that I quite like for some reason. I find it entertaining to watch people be really stressed about the world ending. But a phrase the writer clearly loves is planet killer. And like the early part of the film hinges on the notion that this is a minor spoiler for the beginning of the movie, but it's an asteroid disaster movie, so you kind of get what's going to happen. Everyone knows there's like a comet passing by the Earth, but everyone's expecting it's like a school project. It's going to be the closest flyby ever, and it's sort of left relatively ambiguous about whether this is deliberate misinformation to keep people calm or whether people generally didn't know it was going to be a disaster. And there's a moment, and the moment where it dawns on people that no, this is, a serious threat is actually quite chilling in some ways, until Gerard Butler's neighbor runs out into the driveway holding his phone and yelling in through Gerard Butler's car window, "They've changed the classification. They say it's a planet killer." And it's like, is that what you would say? Because it's a very abstract way of looking at the planet where you live. Like,
yeah,
exactly.
Let's specify which planet.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we're going to need to go to a different planet, but unfortunately, we live in suburban Atlanta in 2020. So
it's a planet killer, and they mean this planet, not just any planet. This one.
It did expose like just it has that film has a like chef's kiss line in news readers' voices quavering as they realize that they too are a human from Earth and will be affected by the events being described on the teleprompter. Like
that was my favorite line in Tenet, where someone is explaining the stakes of the movie, and if X happens, everything and everyone who's ever existed or ever will exist will be completely annihilated. And the woman says, "Including my son."
The way to redeem that line, if you weren't a coward, is to go, "Not mine, mine's imaginary," like some character.
Oh, Christopher Nolan trying to imagine how women think.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, how would I filter this through woman brain?
Yeah, emotional.
That's the last film I saw in the cinema, and the entire audience laughed aloud the moment Kenneth Branagh was revealed. And I don't know why. I don't know if it was some sort of like brief summer reprieve from lockdown mania. Like we're all just excited to see Kenneth Branagh. Like, what's he gotten up to this time? As a Russian arms dealer. But yeah, it was. Yeah, I don't know why. There was just some sort of shared understanding that this was funny. That we're all supposed to be afraid of Kenneth Branagh for the rest of this film. And it's quite, he can be scary, but he can also be Kenneth Branagh.
His two roles.
And Poirot.
Oh yeah,
he's
a very versatile actor. I don't know why we're dragging him.
No, I don't know. He's an incredible actor, but I don't know why. It was almost like a relief to see him. Let's see. What's the next one? Colin writes, Dear Crate and Crowbar, is Outer Wilds an example of a good Doom Clock game? If so, give us your thoughts on how it succeeds. Cheers, Colin.
You weren't here for this chat last week.
I wasn't. I'm passing this one to Tom.
Yeah, I was listening to the episode where this question was asked, and I was like, champing at the bit to chime in on this discussion because it's a really interesting topic. I think. I think Outer Wilds is a death clock, but Alex, you were saying you didn't feel it was.
Only because death clocks, I tend to find make you make decisions in the long term decisions. I suppose it puts pressure on those as opposed to sort of short term. I don't know. I'm not really. I'm thought it through, but it feels to me like there's a long term thing.
Yeah, you're right. You never lose anything permanent from the Outer Wilds death clock.
Right.
Whatever you lose is something you could get back next time, and that is different to stuff like XCOM objectives that expire because if you don't get them, you can never get them. But yeah, Invisible Ink is an interesting one where like every mission has a death clock that's ticking right from the off, and it was interesting because like some of the XCOM 2 stuff, there's a lot in XCOM 2 that makes design sense on paper. You can sort of make a good argument for why it's in there and how it changes player behavior in a way that pushes them towards experiences you want them to have. But there is a large contingent of players who have a really bad reaction to it. And Invisible Ink, it's very controversial that there's a death clock right from the start, basically, especially because it's phrased as an alarm. So, in a stealth games are usually about avoiding triggering the alarm. And in Invisible Ink, they just tell you the alarm has gone off now. Like they already know you're here and they're just gearing up their response to you being here. And that sort of takes something away from the stealth aspect, I guess. And also the time pressure is something everyone's extremely sensitive to. I found it interesting because, it didn't bother me in Invisible Ink. Whatever they did to make me accept it worked. I did accept it. It was just like, okay, sure. They're just like, I sort of saw it in my head. My head canon for it was like, it's not that they know we're here. It's just that the longer we go beating people up and stealing shit, the more they're going to send people to investigate what is going on floor 34. It's not like, oh, we know the Invisible Ink guys are here and we know it's these 4 people. Like, we're not blown. It's just that what we are doing is inherently suspicious, and it makes sense that more and more guards would teleport into this floor to try and figure out what is happening here exactly. Something's happening here. And it, like, okay, it's not that isn't quite how the mechanic works, because it's not triggered by you stealing stuff, and it's not triggered by you attacking people. It's there are certain events that do up the alarm rating, but it's going to keep going up no matter what. But it was still possible for me to like headcanon my way around that. And I'm also much more tolerant of it in turn-based games than real-time games. When it's a real-time game, there's a real time limit. That is incredibly stressful. And in a turn-based game, I mind it a lot less because I have, each turn I can spend as long as I like thinking about how to optimize it. And I sort of agree with the broad principle that pushing people to optimize for turns is interesting. It usually makes them engage with the mechanics more, and there's you can get more out of a turn-based game that way. But I also think there's another game design lesson to apply here, which is that it's, if possible, it's almost always better to use carrot rather than stick. Like, you almost always want to reward people for doing what you want them to do rather than punish them for not doing what you want them to do. And I think time is definitely one like that. Like, we ended up doing that. Like, heat signature has time pressure when you set off an alarm. So we did it kind of, if you set off the alarm, then time pressure happens. And it's a pause and play game. So you again, it's no real time pressure. But then when it came to like rethink that for the daily challenge stuff, we went for something where you are rewarded the faster you do it. So it's more in terms of getting a bonus score for doing it quickly than it is for being punished for doing it slowly.
Tom writes, "Hello, great crates of the bar. Theory. Valheim's viral success could be in some part attributed to its download size. Only 1 gigabyte. A friend can go from that sounds cool to buying and playing with said friend in minutes. Discuss!" he demands. But there's a question as well, but we can obviously talk about install size. What is your most uninstalled game? The game you keep installing thinking you'll definitely get the most out of it this time, but then always uninstall because something new and shiny needs the space, and well, I'm not playing that really, am I? Mine is probably Dishonored 2. I don't think there's a Steam stat to confirm this. Loved the first one, but was at university at the time, and since then, immersive sims seem too hard to commit to in real post-uni life. Thanks for reading, Tom. This is probably going to be an obvious answer from me, given the saga of me not playing this game, but it's probably the Witcher series. I've installed the entire series and uninstalled it like every year, I suspect. I think I need to learn that having a thing available isn't going to make me engage with it, right? It's like placing a heavy book in front of my computer, and I will like I will simply just like work around it. Like, I'll just sort of like, it'll get cups of coffee put on it. It will be kind of navigated around until I decide to tidy up and it goes back on a shelf.
Mine is Sherlock Holmes Crimes and Punishments, which I want to play because it's I'm told that it's a game where like you investigate the crime and then you just sort of like make a call on who you think did it, and you're allowed to just go ahead with that even if it's not right, and then you find out later whether your accusation was correct, and there's kind of consequences for that one way or the other, which sounds great, but for some reason it never quite it always escalates to the point of me installing it, but never escalates to the point of me playing it.
I think for me it's XCOM 2, which I've just stubbornly just not been able to get into over, and just, I don't know, probably about 5 or 6 attempts now, and different things have gotten in my way. Say again.
You started to play it? You started to play.
Yeah, so installed. This is the time. So I've probably either listened to you talk about it, Tom, or read something, because clearly it's a good game, and clearly, it's exciting and inspires good stories, and that makes me install it. This is going to be the time, I think. And then I just cannot get into it. It's the Doom. Actually, there's a Doom clock aspect to it, which I know why it's there, and I don't enjoy it, and then I give up.
That game that's definitely the classic example of like a bunch of mechanics that all sort of make sense on paper but contribute to a bad feeling for a lot of players in practice. Because Graham was saying he also just loved XCOM 1 and couldn't get into XCOM 2. It's very pressuring, and also the Doom clock thing, the thing I don't like about it is I can't make judgment calls about how how much I can afford to let that tick up. I take an action. It's like, oh, let's tick up the doom clock by 2. And it's like, well, is that okay or not? Like, I don't know what happens when it fills. I also don't know how many events I'm going to get that reduce it. I don't know how many events I'm going to get that increase it. I don't know how much control I'm going to have over it. And so it's always this unknowable thing of like,
is there just this balance
to kind of feel bad?
Yeah, is there this elastic band which is always going to apply a certain amount of pressure, and it'll slacken a bit if things are getting a bit fruity, and it'll tighten it if I do too well.
And I think if I have to drill down into like, why did I did click with XCOM 2 and I did get into it in a big way, although with the caveat that I was all the while creating probably the biggest list of complaints I've ever had against a single game. Like, there was so many problems with the game, even though I fucking love it. I played it for hundreds of hours, and I played it multiple campaigns and the expansion and everything, gone hard on it. But all the time I'm always like, oh, why is it like this? Oh, why does it do this? Oh, I wish it didn't do that. And I think the reason is that doom clock. I just looked at it and thought, well, I don't like that I can't make good decisions about this. I don't have enough information to make decisions on it. So I think I'm just going to not worry about it. I think I'll just let it, I'll ignore it. And if it really gets terrible, if it actually ends my campaign, then I'll hate the game for it. But until that point, I'll let it just ride. And that kind of works. Like it's much more generous than it looks like it is. It makes you feel bad way before you're encountering any actual problems. So it's mostly kind of an illusion. It's to give you the feeling of pressure, but it doesn't really, it's very hard to actually fall foul of it.
Well, that just makes me more angry.
Glad I can help.
How about you, Matu?
No.
Okay. Anyone got any supplemental thoughts about the size of game and as qualifier of success? Don't think it drives success. Don't think it hurt.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. I question how many people make their buying decision based on install size. How many people even know the install size when they buy?
Yeah, on Steam, you can't find out until you hit the download button, right? I don't remember seeing it anywhere.
Yeah, there could be, obviously word of mouth is a thing, but I don't know. Can't imagine it being the deal breaker for a lot of people.
It's definitely been a, when I was sort of first getting into Valheim, it was definitely something that I could say to be like, we could play this evening. Like Tom has written in his email, we can, this is not going to be something we have to leave for tomorrow or whatever. Like, it's only a gig. But I don't think that's where the viral success comes from necessarily. But I think it's worth bearing in mind Accelerant. And it's also genuinely refreshing.
Yeah, I think that is important because each purchase is based on an event, and most of those events are going to be your friends saying, we could do this now. And that is rare for a lot of multiplayer games. And, I think, that's such an important moment. That was a pointless thing to say in the end there.
Oh,
I think more in terms of a potential negative they've avoided. Like, I think we all know like GTA and Modern Warfare are big games, but most other stuff is not. I feel like most indie games are not huge. Like if I'm Deep Rock Galactic, I don't know exactly how big it is, but I bet if we wanted to play that in an hour's time, we could all have it.
Yeah, it's smaller than you'd think it is, yeah.
I remember that being bigger than I thought it is, or smaller than I thought it was. Okay, hang on, I need to find out how big it is.
I think it's 3 gigs, I think.
It's 2 gig. Yeah, it was smaller than I thought it was going to be. Yeah, okay, fine. Point stands. Well then, the answer is maybe.
Creighton Crowbar solves another one, guys.
Yeah. Well, we're all very tired, and I think some of us are getting a little testy, so it might be bedtime.
Time to wrap us in a towel.
Wrap us in a towel.
You have to switch us on though in the towel. That was the point, wasn't it?
We have to shut this all down before Marsh displays his red ring.
Oh my god.
Spicy.
That is all of the podcast we've got time for. If you'd like to send us a question for future episodes of the podcast, you can do so by emailing us at questions@creightoncrowbar.com. You can find us on Twitter @CreightonCrowbar. Our website, createcrowbar.com, has a link to our Discord where people be and do chat. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters who make this possible. You can find out more about the Patreon at patreon.com/createcrowbar. This episode and others much like it are available on YouTube with a picture, one frame of entertainment per episode, which you can find at youtube.com/createcrowbar. I believe that's everything. I've been Chris Thurston.
I've been Marsh Davis.
I've been Tom Francis.
I've been Alex Wiltshire. Thanks.
Everybody. God.
Wow.
Getting more hellish each time.
Blah.